Back in medium. It's been a long time since I've even attempted to stream. Oh, this is chugging a little bit on me, more than likely because the sculpt itself is quite big. Actually, not even sure how big it is right now. Hold up. It's not too bad, I think. Well, anyways, I'm doing this for a very specific friend of mine who was kind enough to give me his Oculus Quest 2, and so this is my little thank you to him. So I want to polish this up a bit. I'm not quite sure how yet, but I just want to simplify some of the geometry on it. Pose it potentially and see where we can go from there. So, but we got the glowy eyes. You always need the glowy eyes. In fact, I might need a little bit of a darker background so I really can see what's going on. And forgive me, I haven't been in medium in a long time, like a long time. So, it's like sort of slowly getting back into the groove of things. Part of it's because I haven't had a dedicated PCVR set up for a while. My Rift was breaking this way and that, and so kind of added up. That's a little better. So the wings are separate from the body right now. And I should tell you, I started this in Gravity Sketch first. Actually, so a lot of the like sort of outlying pieces you're seeing here are actually Gravity Sketch lines, you know, like the default sort of tool that you have from the get-go. That was kind of how I got the gesture of the body first, and then I took it into here. Normally it would be really difficult to get, I mean, not difficult, but quite RAM intensive and GPU intensive to get a Gravity Sketch model like that into medium, and so I think that's why by default this is already quite big. And even on a machine that's this powerful, it's at 3080, it's chugging a little bit, you know. So, but I've never had that luxury before of being able to enjoy not having to worry so much about RAM, not having to worry. And you can sort of see it. It is probably because I'm streaming that this is running a little slower than we'd like, but that's okay. Gotta get that tail in before the day is done. And I picked this specific figure because it's very much in line with some of the aesthetics I've seen from my friend Chris, and he's developed a few things himself, games and otherwise, and so I thought, I don't think I've seen a Griffin in his pieces before, but this is very sort of in that same wheelhouse. You know, when I'm doing something for other artists, I really like to think about their sort of their essence, you know, for lack of a better term. Let's get some of these pieces out. Oops. By the way, I'm not checking this stream from here. I don't have a fancy setup. I never have had a fancy setup when streaming, so apologize if you're actually watching and you're making any sort of comments. I appreciate you watching to begin with, so thank you. I actually have a podcast that I'd love to listen to while I'm doing this. So it's an interview with Jamie Lee Curtis by Eli Roth for Halloween. So, and I'll check whether or not this stream is going at the same time.
And I went to John and Deborah. Unfortunately, John dropped out as the director. Deborah ended up dropping out as producer, and I ended up in the H2O. But my only thing was, if you see the movie, if you remember the movie, Lori has changed her name. She's on the run. You know, she's taken her kid and left. But she's an alcoholic. Because nobody gets through that without some trauma.
Oh, cool.
That was my way of making sure that there was authenticity of trauma.
Were you the one who brought Kevin Williamson into H2O?
No,
I see you.
no,
I
they
see
did.
you.
They had already planned that.
Hold up.
And because nobody
Ultimately
gets
was
through
supposed
that
to be a
without
little bit
some
about
trauma, and on some level, sort of ending it. It's too long of a story
try to
we
look
could
up every once in a
spend.
while.
No, I mean, Brian Fuller's making a documentary on queer horror, and Kevin Williamson and Halloween H2O is a big part of it. And Kevin credits you as getting him through his
So
tough
eventually, I
teenage
do
years dealing with
definitely
homosexuality.
want to,
And
pose.
are you aware that there's
this
a
bad
very, very
boy.
large queer
So I'm
fan
gonna have
base
to
that
cut up
identify
the
with Lori as a survivor
arms
of
and legs and
trauma,
whatnot to do
relating it
that.
to their own experiences of what?
Why don't I be quiet and let you? There we go. How's Katabata? And this is also super metallic versus it being more organic, because Chris would make these things almost like, I don't know if y'all remember that scene in Neverending Story where so the Atreyu has to get through the valley at some point, and there are these two like massive statues in the sky with these glowing eyes. That's kind of what I'm getting inspired by, and I have a feeling that that's also where he got that from. I could be totally wrong, but they're massive. I mean, like the size of a large building, you know, like just like that. So I want it to feel very imposing, and at some point I probably will take this and learn how to properly texture and whatnot. Okay, let's see here. Let's also move this around. I do miss Medium a lot. We are gonna So, as you can see, it was very symmetrical to begin with, but the most developed part of this, since I last touched it, is definitely the head. Like, I wanted to build a little bit more, this looks very secretive Nim right now, a little bit more asymmetry here for the expression, and I think I do definitely want to add some more detail where the eyes are. Whether or not that's, like, I love what's happening right here. Bloom effect is really, so I'm going to pull this away a bit so I can see the form better. Look at that handsome mug. Maybe let's give you some eyelashes. Hee hee hee. Oh, oh, oh. Oh. Go. nice guy liner. Okay. Let's do that for the bottom too. Whoops. Now that's what I call some eyelashes. So where should we go next? Maybe I should also color the talons as well. For funsies.
Trauma.
Oh, cool.
That was my way of making sure that there was authenticity of trauma.
Magic hands
Were
that
you the
work
one who-
six on your side, but I don't like that you can see. Hold up.
It was like growing up gay.
Well, I don't think trauma is gender specific. I think trauma is universal, and I'm not surprised at all
There we
that
go.
that would be a person who someone would look to for some sense of self-acceptance. And, you know, it's lovely to be able to represent that. But that was the H2O vibe for me. The thing that drove me was that she's on the run, but she's suffering. And her decision to sort of end it, shut the gate, turn back, go, it's you or me.
Your character, Laurie Strode, even H2O, the Halloween movies, there is something about this thing that keeps coming for you, and you're like, I'm gonna beat it, I'm gonna beat it. It's real, being the ability to survive
It has
trauma.
been real. You see, I think it's from the beginning, the reason Halloween was so wonderful. It's because it was real. Those girls were real.
The way they
John
were-
wanted it to be just real people in
The
real
dialogue you
places.
guys have about
All
boys.
the boys and the thing. Poor Lori scared another one. I mean, this is what people sound like.
Well, it was
so
like
that when the bad guy shows up, you actually care. And ultimately in H2O, that was my goal. My goal was to honor the fact that not only was I still alive, but I was in trauma. And by the way, I never said this anywhere, I also wasn't sober. And I got sober after H2O. So it's interesting that I understood that that secret trauma was probably something that I could relate to as an actor. And, you know, that was driven all by me. All of that part of Laurie's art.
was
And the
driven by-
truth is, I probably produced H2O more than I did 2018, but I didn't get credited
You didn't get the
as a
credit.
producer at the time because I didn't know to demand it. See, now I would go back and go, oh, hello, my name right there. Because of course I went there. It was my
You were the one who
idea.
did it. You brought it.
I
You
invited them to lunch.
And you brought
John,
the whole
Deborah,
thing.
how about the three of us, we make a movie 20 years later? And that was probably
With the whole conception of her as a survivor, everything.
as a survivor, as an alcoholic who was on the run. And what happens if you make the decision that life on the run is not life? Because freedom only comes from truth. So let's create a scenario where the bad guy shows up, but instead of running, she locks the gate, throws away the key, and says, let's go. Let's dance. You or me. Because if you kill me, I'm going to die free. And if I kill you, I'm ending your prison that you've put me in. And that, to me, had an emotional undercurrent for that movie, which worked, as you saw. She kills, ultimately, an innocent person because Michael ultimately became the ambulance driver. And the next movie I was in simply because that was my deal with them, which is if we're going to kill Michael in H2O and the audience is going to think Michael is dead, and I think he's dead, I will make the movie. But you're then going to need to put me in the next movie. Laurie is now going to have to deal with the fact that she's killed an innocent person. She's in an institution, and you're going to have to kill her because I'm not going to jerk off an audience anymore. I've done it, 20 years. End it. But if we can't end it because it's a franchise, I understand, but you have to kill me because then I don't have to deal with this anymore.
And yet here we are.
And yet,
Halloween 2018.
Right, because
2 more in production.
Because what David and Danny did is they just decided to erase everything except Halloween 1 and Halloween 2.
And audiences seemed really ready for that.
Oh, actually, not even Halloween 2.
Not even Halloween 2, because that
Halloween
was the
1.
sister. Yeah, because that was the brother-sister reveal. It doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense.
Of course.
What did David Gordon Green and Danny McBride come up with? What was the story of Halloween?
Okay, so I'm going to stop you for one thing, though, because we're in the horror world. And I mentioned this to you the other day, and I think your fans will be very happy to know this. I may have said this somewhere in the world because I'm near death, and I'm sure I've said many things over and over again, but you know what I mean. When I was 12 years old, I was precocious. What? Flirty. What? Me?
Well,
Flirty
not
at
even
12?
you.
What are you talking
I don't know who
about?
you're talking about. You make this story.
Seriously, and you know, I was funny. Anyway, Ray Stark produced The Exorcist, was a very good friend of my family, and I used to see Ray Stark, and he loved me because I was 12 and me.
Yeah.
And he asked my mother if she would let me audition for The Exorcist.
Wow.
And of course, my mother was like, no.
In a word, no.
In a word, no. So I heard that he had asked, but she said no.
But were you into horror then? Were horror
No,
movies cool?
I'm
No.
not into horror today, Eli Roth. My point is, so they made the movie, but the house that my parents bought in Beverly Hills, for about 2 years we lived there, had a projection thing, and for my 15th birthday, we screened The Exorcist. And I had like boys and girls over, and we watched The Exorcist. It freaked me out so badly that the next day at school, my friends would run down the hall chasing me because they would come behind me and go like this. Demi, why you do this to me? Demi, why you do this? And it freaked me out so bad that my 1972 Mercury Capri had a personalized license plate of, wait for it, Demi. That's how freaked out I am by horror movies, that my first car, the license plate was Demi. Just saying. So there, just so you know.
You'd think that you would avoid an Exorcist-themed license plate to not have to
No,
look
it
at
was
it every
such
time.
a perfect thing to be able to say how much I didn't like being frightened.
Right.
So, you know, I'm sure somebody
Do you
will
know
go.
the original house that the director, Michael Dougherty, bought the house in Pasadena, and he stands in the window?
Oh.
He bought it. He has
Why?
it.
Okay, don't even. So anyway, that's just a little bit of a amuse-bouche for you horror fans.
Amuse-bouche. slow that down a little bit. Steady stroke, baby.
Tell me the plot of Halloween 2018.
2018 is 40 years, 40 years later. Laurie is living by herself. She had a child. Obviously, the daughter was taken from her. Laurie was a very unstable person. She had trouble with the law. She had trouble fitting in. Obviously, she was very frightened, paranoid person. She has a fractured relationship with her daughter. She now has a granddaughter. They live in the town. And Laurie lives in a compound. She's a survivalist. She's a prepper, as they're called. You know, she lives in the woods. She is a sure shot, practices every day on these dummies. And she's an end of days prepper, ready for Michael Myers because she knows Michael's going to come back. She is highly aware that Michael has been sentenced to go to this maximum at one of those super max prisons, that he's being transferred. And she is going to make sure he gets on that bus, that it goes off to the supermax, and only then maybe would she even begin to deal with her trauma. Maybe. We'll never know. And of course, he commandeers the bus through acts of incredible violence, and he escapes. So now you've set up a woman who's been waiting, and he comes back. So it's a...
Well, what this movie did beautifully...
It's so beautiful, by the way. It's
David
so
Gordon
beautiful.
does make beautiful movies.
But I mean, just the opening sequence at the mental hospital.
The prison. It's amazing.
The prison with the checkerboard floor and just the shots, the beautiful way those other people out on the yard, the dog barking, that strange man kind of having a fit. And
no, it's all the kind of beauty that he puts in George Washington and Snow Angels applied to
beautifully shot, just beautiful. And does it effortlessly, by the way. Does it without any of the crazy meticulousness of it. He's just like, yeah, let's do that. Like, he's very free, very fun, very inventive.
Well, the oneer. This movie finally gave us that moment of Michael Myers going around on Halloween.
In the house. Oh,
just
no.
walking
It's
through the house, walking around the neighborhood, children bumping into him.
Spectacular.
Because
and the nurse and the car.
Incredible.
And the getting a thing, and oh, I left my keys, and then going, and then coming back, and oh, they were in my purse, and it's spectacular. It's spectacular. But the setup of the journalists. So what was genius about, I felt, that what Michael and Danny did, is they have to give the story. You have to tell the story. Who's going to tell the story better than tabloid journalists, English? Sorry, all my friends across the pond, don't be mad. But English, smarmy English journalists who are pretending to be really interested in her journey, in her story. At one point she says, my story? Who are you people? And all of your life and your daughter and your failed marriages. And her only focus is Michael Myers and a little money that they're giving her. But it's spectacular that he created them to both tell the story to the audience, get into the hospital through them. Whole thing with the guy taunting Michael with the mask. I mean, it's brilliant.
Amazing.
Brilliant. And then their demise in that bathroom. It's
fantastic.
Just spectacular.
You want to see them get it. You have to have a few people that you really want to see Michael just
English
rip apart.
English journalists.
Yeah.
It's you really want to see those people get it.
Yes.
Because they're horrible people. They're horrible people. Last thing in the world I thought I would do is another Halloween movie. Last thing. It was never on my radar. It was never going to happen.
But there is quite the courtesance, not that you ever went away, but to have Halloween and Knives Out back to back, and half the people know you, if you watch horror movies, know you from Halloween, and otherwise they would know you from comedies and action movies. I mean, you're iconic in multiple, you're iconic for a reason, but in multiple genres. I mean, what a thing to have that happen at this point. We're just out of nowhere. You don't think you're going to do that movie, and now all of a sudden it becomes bigger than
any
of them.
Look at this with you, motherfucker. I mean, like, seriously, the idea of this wonderful set of opportunities that I've had in the last 5 years, totally out of the blue. Last thing I ever thought would happen. And that movie was so spectacular.
So were you surprised that it resonated the way that it was such a cultural milestone? That it was as big as it
Well,
was?
what David and Danny had done, unbeknownst to them at the time, was they had some sense that a generation of women were going to start telling the truth about their experiences being oppressed, either physically, sexually, emotionally, by men with the Me Too movement. And they did not know that ahead of time, and yet, as we were launching the 2018 movie, it was right in the center of the Me Too movement. And so women taking power and speaking truth to power and voicing their experiences as trauma victims was echoing all over the world when we released that movie, a movie about a woman taking power from her trauma against her oppressor. So I think there was this spectacular confluence of life and evolution of women and Laurie Strode coming to grips with Michael Myers. It happened to be that, and what's spectacular is that they created a trilogy, right? So they, Danny and David, from the beginning, Halloween, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends, 3 movies. And the second movie is about mob violence, which we are now releasing in 2021 because of a year delay from COVID. And we have just, in America, watched a mob descend on January 6th with nooses and stun guns and members of Congress in the building. And we all watched it on TV. And on October 19th, 2021, we're gonna watch a movie about a mob descending together. And that's another moment where Danny and David had some idea that people were gonna take matters into their own hands.
Well, the best horror movies, often you can't even see it until there's a little bit of distance.
But that's what I'm saying. And
But now I would never have, I don't think anyone that I've read has tied the success of Halloween 2018 to the Me Too movement until I've just heard you say, but of course it makes sense. That's absolutely what
it's
what it's
trauma.
about. But you also brought that to Laurie. I mean, when you're reading the script, I'm sure you had input on who Laurie is, what she's there, what was that all in the script that tells her.
Basically, it was all there. I mean,
So you can see it. I'm sort of
fractured
taking down some
relationship,
sharper corners.
trying to work your way back, beautiful connection between the granddaughter. I'm going
Making
to tell
sure
you a
it's just
story.
not too
This I have told before, but I don't think I've told it with you. I certainly
visually
didn't tell it with
confusing,
you.
I guess.
Here's what happened, which has changed my life. Seriously. So the entire movie we made, and we're in Charleston.
So here's where
I'm there alone without my family. I have my little dog. You know, making movies lonely. It was emotionally, you know, it was, Laurie was in a very fragile state. And so I was in a very fragile state for the shoot. The last day of the shoot for me is the day of Laurie watching Michael get on the bus
save that.
when he's going to be sent off to the Supermax. And there's no dialogue. It's written in the script. Laurie is in her truck with a gun and alcohol, and 20 years or 40 years of memories and feelings are happening to her. That's all it says. Nothing else. Not a word, no dialogue. The last shot of the movie for me as an actor, I'm going home the next day, was a shot of me in the truck at night by a chain link fence by some fake building out in the middle of nowhere in Charleston.
This is a good. This
And,
gives me a better
you know,
view
showed
of
up
what
to work.
the paint looks like.
I didn't have to rehearse anything. They were just lighting the shots. Obviously, they had a bunch of toys to play with. And I prepared, got dressed, did my preparation. And they said, okay, they're ready. And as I walked to the set, every single member of the crew, what we didn't do on Borderlands, because I showed up halfway through, is normally I like people to wear name tags because I don't get to know anybody. Everybody knows me. And it's a shitty feeling.
Yeah.
So whoever it is, I ask for the first couple weeks, everybody wear a name tag says, hi, my name is Eli, I'm the director. And so for the first 2 weeks, we had name tags. When I approached the set, late at night, out in the middle of nowhere, a chain link fence and a building, and my truck, every member of the crew was wearing a name tag that said, we are Laurie Strode.
That's awesome.
Wow.
And nobody said a word. And the entire crew stood there in solidarity of what they knew I was now going to have to go act. They stood in silent solidarity with me. And I looked at every single one of them. And they just looked at me as I walked by, all of them wearing an I am Laurie Strode. We are Laurie Strode. And I got in that truck, and David just started rolling. And for 20 minutes, I let 40 years go. It's in the movie 10 seconds. But for 20 minutes, with all the different toys, I just sat in that truck and relived 40 years. And that was my final shot on the movie. And it was the gift of this group of people who understood, because they had just spent 8 weeks with me telling the story. And they knew that this moment was important.
It's beautiful.
It was spectacular.
In the wake of Halloween, there was a whole wave of Jamie Lee Curtis Hall of Fames.
No, there wasn't a wave. There were three.
For me, it was a wave.
There were three.
Oh, no, it's a wave.
There were three.
Three makes a wave. Let's talk about Terror Train.
Terror Train is a bunch of college kids, New Year's Eve, taking a train, and a bad guy shows up.
What are your memories of shooting at night, shooting with John Alcott? Now, John Alcott shot Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, The Shining, and now
So
Terror
John
Train.
Alcott, we shot in a practical train the entire movie. We shot all nights in Montreal in the winter. The only place we could house an entire train with many cars was a train packing warehouse with a, aluminum warehouse built around tracks so they can bring trains in, load them, and then open the door at the end, and then the train goes out. But it was a train packing warehouse that worked until midnight every night. So we had no clean sound from 6 o'clock at night until 12 midnight. So anything we recorded on that time had to be re-recorded in soundproof rooms for 6 hours.
So you'd shoot and then ADR the scene right away.
We would go straight into a little soundproof room and basically just loop it. Do 3 takes of just doing all the dialogue 3 times, and then they would lay that in. And still we had to, obviously, do dialogue replacement later. And then from midnight until 6, we had clean sound. But it was all nights, freezing cold. And if you weren't in the scene, like here we are in a little set, where everybody else is sitting was a frigid, dark, brutally cold warehouse where people were freezing. And the heaters, it was hard.
So you're 19 years old, 20 years old?
20.
Halloween has come out. It's a huge hit.
Yeah.
And now you're freezing in a warehouse.
No,
in Montreal.
Halloween came out. It was a huge hit. It wasn't a huge hit. It grew to be a hit. I got no other jobs. Halloween came out. I got no jobs. The
Yep.
2 jobs I got were an episode of Charlie's Angels where I play professional golfer and Cheryl Ladd wrestles an alligator in a stream.
As she does.
Because the bridge we're
She
walking
does.
on collapses. And then I did an episode of The Love Boat with
Nice.
Gavin McLeod, who died yesterday.
I didn't know Gavin McLeod
He
died.
died yesterday at 90. And I did an episode of Love Boat, wait for it, with, wait for it, Janet Leigh, where I'm on my
Excuse
honeymoon
me.
and my mother and father, I think it's Norman Fell and Janet Leigh, come on my honeymoon on the Love Boat.
That's after
Those
having
are the
like the
two
movie that
jobs that I
changes
got.
movies, the most successful independent movie, the biggest
But it
horror
wasn't
movie.
at the time the most successful independent movie because that took time.
It took time back then.
So after Halloween came out, it started to gain a little bit of traction. I got no jobs. I did Charlie's Angels and Love Boat. And then John wrote the part in The Fog for me. And wait for it, my mother, Janet Leigh, to be in The Fog because he felt weird that the movie was successful and I
you
wasn't
weren't
getting
getting
any
work.
work. So he wrote the part in The Fog. We went up to Northern California, made The Fog. And then I got Prom Night first, which was shot in Toronto.
Yep, great Canadian slasher film, Paul Lynch.
Yes, with Leslie
Nielsen.
Nielsen with his fart machine.
Now, explain to me the Leslie Nielsen fart machine. before
So
we go further
Leslie
into
Nielsen
Eric
had a fart machine in his pocket at all times.
Not a human, not like he's a fart machine. He actually brought one.
He brings, it was a
Which is pretty
little,
advanced technology for like 1980.
it was something he could replicate fart noises, and he would do so all the time, including in funeral scenes when you're all supposed to be crying. And he would just have this ridiculous thing where he would let farts go, which is cute and funny once. Let me just say.
By the end of
And
the show, it didn't.
Well, no,
All right.
because you're
Well,
trying
I'm
to.
gonna end this live stream
again,
for
we're
now.
trying to make
'cause it's gonna
something
be
happen.
cutting off
Were
from
you?
here on
Did
out.
you
I don't
feel like
I
you
did
were
not like that.
I don't want to.
relegated to being in
expose
these
you all to that
movies?
kind of
Nope.
You wanted
Are
to-
you kidding? I was not paid
Man, I